Good evening, who's ever out there that's watching this. I hope this is doing this correctly. I think it's doing this correctly. This is the fifth installment. I look 10. Fifth installment of the Texas Poetry Roadshow. I am the 2022 kind of into 2023 Texas Poet Laureate. They haven't figured out the new person yet. Yeah, they haven't selected the new person, so technically I'm still in the seat until they announce the new person. I think they're in the middle of trying to figure out the new person. Fingers crossed, who is ever in the finals or semifinal. I don't know how this works. My name is Lupe Mendez. I almost forgot to say that part. And I am the 2022, kind of 2023 Texas Poet Laureate. I'm coming to you live from my office / bedroom here in Houston. And joined with me this evening are the brilliantly amazing poets for the evening. Bendito entre las mujeres. This evening I am joined with, man, like heaven is what I'm joined with. Joining me this evening, Felita Hicks, Ray Crawford, and Andrea Corte Botero. It is a joy and a privilege to share this space with you. Thank you to the three of you for joining me this evening. I'll read their bios and we can get into the work. I will share one or two pieces, surprise, and I will then turn everything over to these three magnificent poets. Each poet has the opportunity to read to up to 20 minutes. And then afterwards, we'll have a nice conversation about all the things poetry and all the things art. And so I'll start with all the bios. In order, Andrea Corte Botero is the author of the poetry book En las paradas del fin del mundo, in the prairies of the end of the world, Valparaíso 2019, La ruina del nombre, the ruin that I name, Visor 2015, and Puerto Calcinado, Port of in Ashes, Universidad Extrenado 2003, Valparaíso 2010. She's also the author of selected poetry collections, Chinatown, A Todo Hora, Chinatown 24/7, Valparaíso 2015, Desierto Rumor, Desert Murmur, El Ángel Editor 2016. She has also published books of prose, A Nude Photographer, a biography of Tina Modotti, Panamerica 2005, and Blanca Varela, or Writing from Solitude, Universidad de los Andes 2004. In 2019, she curated and wrote a critical study for the Colombian Woman Poets Anthology, Barajos de Sombra, Vaso Roto 2019. This book obtained the International Latino Book Award for Best Poetry Anthology of 2020. Andrea Corte has obtained recognitions, including the National Prize for Poetry from the Universidad Extrenado of Colombia in 2003, the Puente de Estrujas National Poetry Prize in 2005, honorable mention for A las Cosas que Oí en el Rubén Diario International Poetry Contest, Pen Club International, the Città de Castroviari Prize in 2010, to the Italian editor of Port and Ashes from the International Latino Book Award in 2020. Her poems have been translated into English, French, German, Catalan, Italian, Portuguese, Macedonian, Arabic, Polish, Greek, Chinese, and Russian. In addition, she is translated into Spanish the poets Khalil Gibran, the Pulitzer Prize winning Tracy K. Smith, and Jericho Brown. Ray Crawford, she, her, they, them, is a Wiley College alum from Houston, Texas, a two-time Houston VIP Slam champion and 2017-2018 Houston Performance Poet of the Year. Ray is ranked among the top 20 Women of the World Poet Slams and top 25 within the rankings of the individual World Poetry Slam. In 2018, she released her first book, In Between Space, which captures the journey and movement of Black bodies in today's society. She currently is the Director of Community Engagement and Youth Programming with Writers in the School, or WITS as we know it here, and continues to support Houston literary artists of all Asian. She loves her some great food and amazingly stylish boots, because that's my homegirl who does the things right. And then lastly, Felita Hicks. She, they is a queer Afro-Latinx activist, writer, and interdisciplinary artist, blah, blah. Born in South Central California and raised in Central Texas, they use their intersectional experiences to advocate for the rights of BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus people. They are the author of Hoodwitch Acre Books 2019, a finalist for the 2020 Lambda Literary Award for Bisexual Poetry. They are the editor-in-chief of Black Femme Collective and a new voting member of the Recording Academy Grammys. Hicks is the recipient of fellowships and residencies from Black Mountain Institute, the Tony Award-winning Broadway Advocacy Coalition, Civil Rights Corps, the Dots Between, Jack Jones Literary Arts, Lambda Literary, Texas After Violence Project, Tin House, Art for Justice, and the Right of Return USA. The poetry, essays, and digital art have been published in or are forthcoming in American Poetry Review, Ecotone, Kenyon Review, Long Reads, Poetry, Slate, the Texas Observer, Yale Review, among others. Their personal account of their time and pretrial incarceration in Hays County is featured in the ITVS Independent Lens 2019 documentary, 45 Days in a Texas Jail, and the Brave New Films 2021 documentary narrated by Mahershala Ali, Racially Charged, America's Misdemeanor Problems. Hicks received a BA in English from Texas State University, San Marcos, and an MFA in creative writing for Sierra Nevada University. Ladies and gentlemen, the poets for your evening. Thank y'all so much for being here. It's so good to share space with y'all. Y'all are brilliant, and we go from here. To begin the evening, my 4-year-old is knocking at the door, so because parenting, sí, mi amor. You don't want to be seen on the screen. ¿Qué quieres? You want pancakes. Now? Dame como 10 minutos. Okay. Hi, everybody. Parenting and poetry. I'm probably going to do a session at this at AWP at some point. And now a record of what's dadding like, right? Okay. We will begin the evening with Andrea. If you're comfortable beginning this evening, we will start with your work, and I'm going to switch so that you can be host so that you can share screens, and we go from there. I'm also going to mute me because noise.
Thank you, Lupe. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm more than honored to sharing this night poetry reading with you, with Ray Crawford and Felita Hicks. This is a true honor for me. I'm going to try to show you a little bit of what I do to get energy flowing tonight. I don't think I can share my screen that. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to go to the poetry. So I'm originally from Colombia. I developed myself as a poet at their fairs, and I moved into the United States about 17 years ago to school. And my poetics is a little bit of reflection of that journey. So I'm going to start reading a few poems from my first book that is called, his name is Poured in Ashes in English, Puerto Calcinado in Español. So this book that I wrote, and that was the book that won the National Poetry Prize at that time from the Universidad Externado de Colombia. It's an exploration of shattered landscapes representing the broken bond between men and territory. I attempt a poetic exploration of violence in my hometown, Barranca Bermeja, Colombia, where I'm originally from, and where the battle between leftist guerrillas and right-wing paramilitary organizations took thousands of lives. And just between 1996 and 2003, when I published this book, forced to leave the region about 50,000 people. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from that book. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read first in Spanish. Then you can feel the music of the original poems. And then I'm going to read English versions. So my first poem is La Merienda. También acuérdate, María, de las 4 de la tarde en nuestro puerto calcinado. Nuestro puerto, que era más bien una hoguera encallada, o un yermo, o un relámpago. Acuérdate del suelo encendido, de nosotras rascando el lomo de la tierra como para desenterrar el verde prado, el solar donde repartían la merienda, nuestro plato rebosante de cebollas que para nosotras salaba mi madre, que para nosotras pescaba mi padre. Pero a pesar de todo, tú lo sabes. Habríamos querido convidar a Dios para que presidiera nuestra mesa, a Dios, pero sin verbo, sin prodigio, y solo para que tú supieras, María, que Dios está en todas partes y también en tu plato de cebollas, aunque te haga llorar. Pero sobre todo, acuérdate de mí y de la herida, de antes de que pastaran de mis manos en el trigal de las cebollas para hacer de nuestro pan el hambre de todos nuestros días, y para que ahora, que tú ya no te acuerdas, y que la mala semilla alimenta el trigal de lo desaparecido, yo te descubra, María, que no es tu culpa, ni es culpa de tu olvido, que es este el tiempo, y este su quehacer. So the translation of this poem, Afternoon Snack, is from Olivia Lott, and it goes this way. Remember too, Maria, 4 in the afternoon, at our pour in ashes, our pour, which was more like a fire run aground or a barren land or a flash of lightning. Remember the ground set to flames, how we crushed the earth's back, as if to dig up a green meadow. The patio where snacks were handed out, our place brimming with onions that my mother salted for us, that my father fished for us. But in spite of it all, you know, this would have wanted to invite God to sit at the head of our table. God, but with no words, no miracles. And just so you know, Maria, that God is everywhere. And on your plate of onions too, even if it makes you cry. But most of all, remember me and the wound from before the graze on my hands in the onion field to change our bread to our daily hunger. And so that now, since you can't remember anymore, and but seeds nourish the feel of what has disappeared, I can show you, Maria, that it's not your fault. It's not about your forgetting, that this is the time, and this is its task. So I'm going to read another poem from the same collection, Puerto Quebrado. Si supieras que afuera de la casa, atado a la orilla del puerto quebrado, hay un río quemante como las aceras, que cuando toca la tierra es como un desierto al derrumbarse y trae hierba encendida para que ascienda por las paredes, aunque te des a creer que el muro perturbado por las enredaderas es milagro de la humedad y no de la ceniza del agua. Si supieras que el río no es de agua y no trae barcos ni maderos, solo pequeñas algas crecidas en el pecho de hombres dormidos. Si supieras que ese río corre y que es como nosotras, o como todo lo que tarde o temprano tiene que hundirse en la tierra. Tú no sabes, pero yo alguna vez lo he visto. Hace parte de las cosas que cuando se están yendo, parece que se quedan. The translation for this poem is also by Olivia Lott, and it goes this way. Broken harbor. If you only knew outside the house, tied to the shore of the broken harbor, there is a river blistering like sidewalks. It's like a collapsing desert when it touches earth, taking along burning grass, so it scales the walls. Even if you are convinced the wall troubled by vines is a miracle of dampness and not water ash. If you only knew the river's not made of water and brings no boats, no ship, but just a bit of algae grown on the chests of sleeping men. If you only knew the river runs and is like us, or all that sooner or later must sink into the earth. You don't know, but I saw it once, becoming part of things, so when they leave, it seems they stay put. Now I'm gonna read a little bit from I have read from my first book a couple of poems. They were translated by Olivia Lott and published in Spoon River magazine a couple of years ago. The translations. Now I'm gonna read from my most recent book that Lupe mentioned earlier. It's the book that I wrote while moving into Texas, particularly into El Paso. It's called In the Praise of the End of the War, En las praderas del fin del mundo. And this project talks a lot, or at least I was dealing with the idea of becoming a mother here and thinking about this experience while also I encounter every day the stories about unaccompanied minors here in the area and other places across the border. And this book is the project that better represents the integration of my poetic with the community where I now belong to. And I explore here the desert landscapes and spaces of peregrination. And it takes also from the conversational, but here it's not between two women like I did in the first book with Maria, but it's now more about father, mother, and son. And I was trying to think about the experience of migration, being an immigrant myself. And so I'm gonna read some poems from there. Couple. Desierto rumor. Padre, madre, ya tengo el peso de un hombre. Así es el puerto del primer día, no escojan alimento para mí, no vigilen mis pasos. Ya he desembarcado en mí, soy solo. Denme una hoja de eucalipto para el viaje, un impreciso pronóstico del tiempo, la brújula quebrada que solo marca norte, un mendrugo de pan. Desmantelen la habitación en que crecí, abran fuego en la noche con mis mantas, otórguenme el don del despojo, de ser posible, un momentáneo olvido. Dispuesto estoy para partir, no ostento otro peso que el nombre. Desert murmur. Father, mother, I'm the weight of a full-grown man. Here is the port to day one. Don't set out food for me. Don't watch over my steps. I've already come ashore on myself. I'm alone. Give me an eucalyptus leaf for the trip, a vague weather forecast, the broken compass that only points north, a bit of red cross. Take apart the room where I grew up, open fire on night with my blankets. Grant me the gift of removal, if possible, fleeting oblivion. I'm ready to set out. I shoulder no other weight but my name. Second poem from that collection, now it's a vision, o visión. Can I read first the Spanish version? Visión. Casi todo era escombros, árboles enanos, piedra que nació quebrada como si este fuera el predio en que arrojaron la pedriza que sobró después de hacer el mundo. Esqueletos de barcos y ballenas soplando en el costado de todo lo que vive. De este lado, madre, no envío misivas que incluyan mi apellido. No lo preciso. Me he hecho uno con él. Y los que tienen temor de pronunciarlo me llaman aquel, uno cuyo nombre es su rostro. Vision. It was almost all wreckage, dwarfs trees, stone born crack open as if this were the piece of land where they toes left over scree after making the war. Skeletons of chiefs, whales spraying on the side of all the living. From this side, mother, I send no messages with my last name. I don't need it. It and me, we have become one. And the people who are scared of saying it out loud call me that one, the one whose name is his face. So I wanted to finish with something more like of the things I've been writing lately. And this is a poem that I wrote during the pandemic. And you're gonna see that's pretty obvious. And it was also the experience of motherhood in the context of sickness and fear, especially fear. That was like another type of sickness we were spreading around. I was very overtaken by that fear of losing my newborn. My baby was born the same day they declared pandemic, March 13, 2020. So the poem is En la guerra del Clorox. Creo que hay dos mundos. En uno de ellos yo lo limpio todo el mundo. En ese mundo tengo laboriosas rutinas para purgar el aire y sus objetos. Hablo del polvo, en parte, la capa que todo lo desborda, pero voy más allá del polvo. Me arrodillo ante las cosas, sea carne, madera, metal o plástico, todo lo recorro, lo exprimo, lo enjabono, lo deshago. Descubro porosidades hasta en lo más llano y las extraigo. En esto, siento como los músculos de mi cuerpo se tensionan cuando bajo hasta una superficie y raspo. Mis extremidades se llenan de un líquido negro e imaginario que lleva el nombre de un cierto placer que desconozco. Yo tengo el control. Esa sensación entre dedos y muslos es mi gran posesión inesperada cada vez que con mi esponja milenaria, como un gigante enfurecido raspo, hasta el resquicio de todo y lo aliviano, lo desgajo y lo azoto hasta arrancarle el borde puro. Hurgo una a una entre las cosas y les saco la muerte que cargan. Pero en las noches viajo al otro mundo, con las manos exhaustas descamando por debajo de las uñas, mi piel desprovista de toda superficie, las manos sin animal, sin brillo de lo vivo, sin la costra de lo muerto. En mi sueño intoxicado por vapores desinfectantes, en la ruta corrosiva de lo limpio, sueño con las tardes inmundas en que yo era libre, el tedio, la caída ociosa de una gota sucia, cuando nadábamos la poseta antihigiénica del otro y nosotros, los inmundos, comiéndonos las uñas en público, tan solo por creerlo, fuimos invencibles. So I'm gonna try to read it in English to finish my participation, and I have to thank this translation is from Craig Epling, and it was the poem was first published in Guernica magazine in 2021. So I'm gonna read it. Dispatch from the Clorox War. I believe there are two words. In one of them, I clean it all, all the time. In that war, my leverage routine serves to cleanse the day and its objects. I'm talking in part about dust, the layer that overflows everything. But now it's more than dust. I kneel before things, whether flesh, wood, metal, or plastic. I wipe it all, rinse it all. I discover porosities in the smoothest surfaces and I extract. In this, I feel the tension of the muscles of my body when I descend to a surface and scrape. My limbs fill up with an imaginary black liquid bearing the name of a certain pleasure, unknown to me. I am in control. That sensation between fingers and thighs is my great unexpected possession. Each time that I, with my millenarian sponge, like a raging giant, scrape deep in the crack of it all, and I buff and split and weep until I find its pure edge. I rummage through these things one by one and bring it out the dead inside them. But at night, I travel to the other world. My hands exhausted, peeling from under my fingernails, skin devoid of any surface, hands without any melody, or the chime of what lives without the scab of what's dead. In my dream, poisoned by disinfectant vapors, along the corrosive route of cleanliness, I dream of the filthy afternoons when I was free. The tedium, the leisurely fall of a dirty drop, when we swam in the hygienical pool of others, and we were the filthy, biting our nails in public, and simply because we believed so, we were invincible. Thank you. Thank you, Felita. And I think Lupe is back. And yes.
Andrea, magnífico. Magnífico.
Thank
Mil
you.
gracias por eso.
Thank you for your patience. I wanted to project, but
I couldn't figure it out either. I was like, what?
It's not in our destiny. We were like, guessing each other. And I think that's beautiful that with this bilingual reading, you allow me to bring Spanish into this night. I'm very grateful for that.
It's beautiful. Y mil gracias por todo. It's an honor and a pleasure.
A ti.
Siempre. And so next, thank you, Andrea. And then next, Ray, whenever you're ready, you can undo the screen.
Good evening, y'all. It's a pleasure to be in this space. The biggest of shout outs to Lupe. This feels like a full circle moment. I started off as a young, scrappy poet in Houston, and Lupe was one of the first people to give me some feedback about my poems and my writing. So it's always good to be in the company of someone who's poured into you in such a genuine way over almost a decade now. So also other individuals in the space, thank y'all. Everything we're doing, I know it's just gonna be fire, fire, fire tight. I got 4 poems for y'all that I'm excited to share because it's been a while, so let's do this. The first poem that I'll be reading is titled Portrait. When entering my family home, you will be greeted by an array of family photos. One of my oldest brother, Gerald, sporting this mean chili bowl cut. Another of the youngest, Deshaun, all missing front teeth and bliss. And one of my brother, Omar, giving his, bitch, you tried it face. Every picture, thousands of words suspended in thin air by the lines in my mother's smile, as she happily tells the story behind every photo. My mother, a curator of beautiful offspring, is proud of her museum. Every picture in its place, walls filled with the history of how her love looked in every era. Her children's photos are mosaics of each muse who captured her heart but couldn't stay to see the final masterpiece. Every child accounted for, except me. When she realizes that her collection is incomplete, she rushes to look for a photo worthy of filling a spot that was never empty in the first place. She asks me why I don't see the intentionality in the brushstrokes of my canvas, or why I question if I'm a masterpiece depreciated in value. My mother and I don't know how to love each other the way we deserve. I picture a mural of bravery and resilience trying to convince a canvas of unfinished metaphors that it is worthy. My fear is that I will always fit perfectly into her shadow. That no matter how many poems I write or stages I touch, that I'll feel like a makeshift spot on the mantle of her memory. Did you know that in every museum that there's a picture being preserved for the day that it is meant to be on display, that there's another one that will never see its own wall? I've been that painting for so long. Been told my worth is unseen to the eye, even my own. And this is a story from a curator who only speaks of me as a stolen masterpiece, waiting to find its way back to a museum that was never its own. So the next poem I have is something that I wrote back during Harvey. I had this weird experience in a space, and it really brought out a different emotion in me that I didn't have for a while. And then I started to realize the emotion that I was having was really a righteous feeling. So I leaned into it. So this poem is entitled Again. White supremacy showed itself to me today in the form of a white man at a Mexican restaurant waving a picture of a Confederate flag while his girlfriend giggled. And I wanted to show him how much I am like my ancestors and nothing like them at the same time. That I had just survived a hurricane, but my bayous have long overfilled with men like him, who only pour out accelerant disguised as white male fragility. I wanted to say that under this dim lighting that they won't be able to tell your darkness from mine. So why don't I show you what true fury looks like? Make myself a CNN headline since all you see is a nigga. How about I pick you up out of that cotton shirt? Compare the blood of my ancestors dripping off of that flag to your blood on my fist. Stop worrying about proving your assumptions of who I am, but I don't. I don't do a damn thing but make it home. I try to find victory in this, that I am alive. This can't be the feeling of being alive. Maybe it is for Black bodies. So this next poem is actually dedicated to the first niece that I was ever blessed with. And I did this as an adaptation of a James Baldwin letter, using kind of his form to really talk to my relationship with my older brother through into my niece. This was the first girl he'd had in his life. And so I think that it was a beautiful transitioning moment for him. And so I wrote this to her. An open letter to Jordan. Jordan, I want to start off this letter by explaining a namesake. Your father was named for his father. This is done with men as a way of carrying a family's name. This is supposed to be seen as an honor. I've always wondered why this was supposed to be that. Carrying someone's name can be like carrying their burdens. I saw your father carry his name like he knew he would be nailed to it. For years, he searched for himself in the wrong places, but I never knew how to confront that. My namesake is to your father. I was named for him as he was named for his. You know, our first, middle, and last name only vary by 2 letters. I tried to become this name once, prove to him that I was worthy of it while he was still searching for his own meaning. This letter wouldn't be genuine if I didn't say that for years I resented him, saw him become the ugliest parts of his name. so much so that I didn't allow myself to be called by mine. I feared that one day it would crucify me. This is when I learned burden, learned that a name isn't just a name. It's an obligation without consent. It is a battle of loyalty and morality. It is a loss of faith and a prayer of redemption. You're named for your father as well, meaning that you are named for me too. I wondered for years if I hung around by his side, would he have found a way to the peace that he had still been searching for? Now I see he has you. You are the piece of him that he fought so hard to be. Jordan, find the softness in your name. Place it where only you can find it. Let it be a piece of you for you. Your name isn't the burden of past mistakes. It is the light that will lead you to the closets that your father and I thought we could clean with silence. Your father and I have made mistakes, none that we have not been able to come back from. It is not our names that connect us, but the understanding of what happens when you allow yourself to become the things that you once feared the most. Forever. Jarrell Crawford. So this last poem, America is still American, and whatever that means. And I feel like as a Black writer, as a Black writer, there was this big pause in wanting to create new work because I felt like I was just retelling the same story. And so I tried to do something different with this one, but somehow it still feels relevant to this day. So the name of this one is Another Morning. I woke up this morning, felt this heavy on my chest, thought it was just my body pleading for more sleep, thought about the hardness of the mattress that held the imprint of my body. I heard bones crack, joints pop into place. I felt this ache. And of course, I complained about how cold the floor was under my feet. I took in the silence of the morning, let Nina Simone play until the CD skipped, stared in the mirror and tried to make sense of my own reflection. I heard my friend's voice in my ear saying that I should take better care of myself because the world needs me. I reminded myself that I only get one chance at this thing called life. So I told myself that I would do better by me tomorrow. I turned on the news to hear that another Black man, woman, child was left dead in the streets. The hardness of the concrete held the imprint of their heavy bodies as if it knew that they were coming. Heard skulls crack, joints went stiff, felt the ache of their Black skin as they heard their air escape from their lungs to the rings of sirens. I wonder if they prayed to God to allow them to make it through this, that if they could, that they would do better by themselves tomorrow. As the heavy of death pressed on their chest, I wonder how hard it was for them to try to tell their body to fight the need for eternal sleep. Did someone tell them that the world needs them? When they thought about the one life they had to live, did they imagine that they would be the exception? When they went cold, did anyone complain for them? Did their deaths make it easier for them to take in the silence that the world would give them? In a pool of blood where they saw their own reflection, could they make sense of the fear that they saw in themselves? Did they replay the scene over and over like a broken record? Did they skip to the part where they would be turned into another hashtag that night? I laid in the spot that held the imprint of my body, stayed there still. The heavy on my chest felt heavier than usual. This heavy sadness confused for sleep. Told my body that it's okay to mourn, that it's okay to ache. Told my body that it's okay to be a target and still moving, that tears and blood drip the same, that there's no amount of sleep that can cure a tired soul. Thank y'all.
Ray, I love you.
I love you.
You know, the funny, you full circle, like having seen your work for years, and like every time you always take my breath away. And so, yay, this is great. And so I'm proud of you, and I'm happy to share space and to the future, yo. Like
It's
we're
only
just out here doing the things right. um, and so the last poet for the evening is Felida Hicks. And Felida, where are you right now? Like, where's home? Where are you doing things out of?
I am both happy and sad to say I'm officially living in Chicago. This is where I live now. It feels weird not to be a Texan.
You still are.
Don't tell Illinois, but I still have my Texas driver's license.
Yes. Do that part.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not giving that up.
Hang on to it as long as you can. But we're proud of you, and thank you for this evening.
Thank you for having me and for curating this space. And as all of us in this room, we've been doing it for a long time. I know what a journey it is to begin where you began and then become the state poet laureate. So congratulations again.
Thank you. I might think it's you next time.
It's definitely not. I can tell you that it's definitely not. Essentially, I moved at the wrong time.
Oh, that's right. Just take over Illinois. Just do Illinois. And
I'm going to just be me and live, because whatever is meant to happen will happen when it happens.
Correct.
Yes. Correct. So in the meantime, I get to celebrate everyone.
Yay.
So in that vein, and both, I think what both Andrea and Ray were saying, so during the pandemic, I did most of it alone in my home by myself in Texas, in San Marcos, and so in the rural community, which basically meant I had no car and I didn't go outside and I didn't have a partner and I didn't have children, and so I worked a lot during the pandemic. And one of the first things that I did was try to understand my grief from losing not just like my freedom to go outside and be around people, but my freedom to move through this space. And then also, like, I did physically lose folks. I lost about 4 people during the pandemic. And the fact that I didn't have a partner, I really wanted to work on self-care, but all the things that came up about self-care, and I didn't know how to put it into words. And so one of my longtime dreams to get published in the Academy of American Poetry, that came true yesterday. And so I'm going to read Self-Care to start us off, and we're going to go on a journey because I want to talk about some erotic stuff and all the complicated parts of sensuality and understanding one's sexuality and sensuality in the midst of all this terror, and in the midst of all the things that are happening in our world. And so we're going to start with self-care. I begged the year for intimacy, dashed down into my sheets with nothing but the fan on. I begged my knees for oil, to bend, easy guillotine around some neck, maybe cut off the lamp of my belly, knock out the dust from my toes, sweep out the tricks webbing up my corneas. I said, give me back my water. And the sleep number started seizing. Put a hump in the hour, but no more. When I finally gave up, I went to the mirror for a look-see and found that bitch sucking face with last winter when I'd come close to the Mojave's affection, only to float on too quick and too far west. Seeing me, she said, something I can do for you? Shaking my head, I let her go on, got me some coffee, and went back to work feeding myself pretty lyrics and lead. And so that poem just came out yesterday, and it was a hard-earned poem because I was trying to figure out how to talk about what it means to like still have sexual and sensual desires, while also constantly being surrounded by headlines of people being murdered and killed, and of government abuse and legislative abuse and loss at all times. And it was no matter where I went in the country. I left Texas officially in 2021. I had a fellowship in Vegas for about 6 months, and I thought I was coming back to Texas. That never happened. I went to California to help with some of my family. And I realized that a lot of my origins for like my desire to kind of want to, and I'm going to go in a whole different direction. My desire to want to publish and get a degree and work within the system, you know, to find some sort of financial stability was always up against my desire to create and to be my natural self, myself that is not constructed by other narratives or other structures or institutions. And I know that that's something I inherited from my mother. So the next poem I'm going to read is Photo of a Girl, 1984, senior photo. And it's from my book, Hood Witch. I can't even see my face. What's going on? There we go. Yeah, Hood Witch. Photo of a Girl, 1984, senior photo, Compton, California. Trace of mounts of Cali, sun dangle from my mother's teeth, her hair levitating up over the crisp, round cut of her shoulders, the early hour carving through her body, still coveting salt water, air, and honey. A morning abad, she glows. In the distance, men can be seen running, a carousel of terrified ponies chasing each other out of the frame, a network of skin distilled by the sudden glint of a butane-streaked face, their static insanity captured forever in digital threat, their bodies convulsing in a pixelated shudder as my mother throws her neck back and laughs, fire slinging from her throat, smoke detangling itself from her eyes, still reaching out to grab and eat the camera. And so that's a real photo of my mother. And my mother looks like she's ready to take on the world. And knowing that that's also the same year she became pregnant with me. And she, you know, she graduates, has a child, gets married, marries a military person, and how life changes so quickly and so suddenly. But that fire that was in her right before that, right? And wanting to kind of not let my fire die. I continue to try to find ways in which to carry my own fire throughout my life. And so even later in the book of Hood Witch, the poem Dog Catchers in Texas, and I'm trying to get some of my Texas poems in here since I'm not in Texas. I was like, let me get some Texas in here. So this is Dog Catchers in Texas. And all I can say is, like, you know how sometimes when you're hanging out with your friends and they're like, oh, he's a dog. Yeah, that part. How I catch them in the Southwest with sweet butter and sangria, wild waters and strange places, with a shovel full of coral snakes, with names and missing fathers, con horchatas, con handmade flour tortillas, con mis caderas, with spare guitar strings, bare feet and thin house dresses, with porches, with poorly whittled totems, with blessed stones and the echo of the hills, with the always stretch of hungry land. All the beer and corn they can stand, I catch them with their own hope. Stiff in their empty pockets with the promise, you too can lose ghost in these striations, or else find them in these hills, either way get lost. Boys come in from all over, in every shade of sand, pretty peach boys and vanilla bean boys, men in full blue, black, and sun-teased browns, los gallos del desierto. Once I'd arc over to meet them, bend the tanned rear till it was a supermoon, to the belly swayed under it, a hammock crest beneath this body. My mud-bruised thighs would rub themselves cayenne, slap out a hem, spread like cut roasted peppers, broil under a sauce San Marcos afternoon. Boys would rut and linger long after, still panting, drool whipping down penny-colored covered skin. I'd obey, roll over, pretend. They would pay me for this. I would let them. And so understanding, like, my first book was a lot about pain and about anger. And I was like, okay, this next book has got to be about joy, and it's got to be about finding joy. And I realized, like, halfway through that, like, it's part grief and it's part joy, and it's part, like, still having to recognize that, you know, that stuff doesn't just go away. It follows me. And so I'm going to read a couple of poems from my new book that is nowhere. You cannot pre-order. It does not exist yet. I'm still writing it. And my editor wants it next month. So like, I am literally in the throes of trying to edit all these poems. And so I've just picked a few. They are in no particular order, essentially, but I'm just going to choose right now. First, I'm going to do this one, and then I'm going to do that one. Since I just read the one about dogs, I'm going to read this one. It's called Brat, and the lifestyle community. And everybody's going to know this because it's going to be my memoir. In the swingers lifestyle community, there are lots of little, you know, names that we have for ourselves, and the kinds of personalities that we have, and the kinds of connections we want to make. And I was a brat. And so that means I like to push buttons until someone pushes back. And so this is Brat. I crave the carnival of my denouement, a silk tent pulsating with the creature of my carnal infrastructure. To be and not be the silver hatchet spilling oil in my bed, performing every little death and the belligerent light of an evening come set too soon. To float an array of divans teasing the freshly slipped pelts of my paramours with the whelm of my kinetic urgency, an acrobat riding their wheels hot. Always I need to be needed. I yearn endlessly for the dimming delights of my innocence, the borderless potential of my reign over my whole being unchecked, the way some stag or another needs to be needed by some homesick man ramming the highway with their pickup, with their legitimate fear of being forgotten by some long-starved woman flooding the county with their mezcal, with their legitimate fear of being let down. To be run down is all I ever need to feel alive. Let me confess, I can come home anytime I want. I choose not to come home alone. And so there is a theme for my book. It's called A Map of My Want. That's the next book. It's going to be broken up into 3 parts as of this particular moment. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are the most 3 common things that people remember from the Declaration of Independence. And I am talking about the Declaration of Independence, both at the legislative level, but also at the very personal, independent level. Like, what does it mean for the individual to have life, liberty, and the pursuit to happiness? And so I'm going to read one more poem from life, and then I'm going to try to stick in maybe 2 or 3 more poems if I got time. So this poem is specifically for Susana Chavez. Susana was a poet and a journalist in Juarez. And when I first started doing a lot of my grassroots work with local organizers, I was, it's not just the grassroots organizing work I was doing in Texas, but also understanding that my background is up in the air, right? My mother doesn't know who her father is. That's a whole nother story. We ain't got time for that. I grew up speaking broken Spanish. There's a lot of other little things about my life that were always question marks because we just never had the pieces filled in for us. And, you know, it wasn't until I was adult and got some blood testing that I learned more. And now that I know more about myself, and now that I know more about my community, right, and the things that I learned, I really started to understand that the work that we do as social justice organizers in the US for mass incarceration is directly related to the work that we do for people who are being detained, people who are trying to migrate to the US, right? And so, like, we cannot separate the 2 things. When we say no more cages, we mean no more cages for anyone. We mean, you know, that we need to make it accessible for everyone. And so This was a poem for Susana Chavez, who was the person who kind of made popular the phrase ni una más, and that means not one more. And this is for her. There were no women who survived the harvest of Juarez. Para Susana Chavez. South of El Paso, the Rio Grande spilled into the pitted mouths of hundreds of thousands of lavender orchids over the years. Together, we mestizas worked the land, the soil clinging to our hooked palms, but their bodies deserted us under the bounty of our rural shade, is lost to the record now. In the end, all we found were their necks, but not their names, their ribs, but not their children. When we could till the terror no more, it spilled into our beds, into our restless sleep, spilled into the hungry and familiar cement, into the hands of the poleros, spilled into the heaving sick of deserted alleys, the polyester suck of the car's backseat, spilled into every front yard, into the borders of my country's chalk outlines, spilling until all was gone. Together, we mestizas prayed for a shape that could not be disassembled, so easily consumed as posterior distal half of radius, shattered scaphoid, uno catillo, hermana a la izquierda, una muerta más. And for folks who don't know the context, Susana Chavez, the poet, the activist, the journalist, was murdered, and they tried to blame it on her. The police tried to blame it on her. And so that she lost her left hand, which was her writing hand, and her head. And so I wanted to find a way to kind of recognize her. Okay. Now I'm gonna move on to another poem. I'm sorry, I'm trying to shift my energy. Yeah, shift energy. This poem is called God Forgive Me. It makes me want to laugh and cry. God forgive me. I paid the rent today. The lights are still on. The water still runs. I bought groceries again. I put $20 in the tank and 20 on the dresser. I bought a dress, a black lace slip that clings. I touched myself through the fabric, fantasized about men with meaty palms, fingers wrapped around my throat. I came several times today. Forgive me. I brought shoes, one for every day I meant to go out and be seen, carefree and wasted. One for every day that I mean to be something, anything. I didn't pray over the bodies of the broken this morning. Instead, I had coffee from Starbucks. I drank a half bottle of Knob Creek, a half bottle of turkey. Forgive me. I bought a box of cigars and I threw it away. I donated nothing this year. God, forgive me. I loved the woman in a La Quinta Inn, showed her what it was like to be worshiped. Then I woke early and left before the alarm rang. Dear God, I ate cheese from 7-Eleven. I had a Four Loko. I bought a pair of sunglasses, watched anime until 4 a.m., lay in bed for hours, watching the fan on my ceiling whip around and around and around and around and around, and said nothing, wrote nothing, went nowhere. God, forgive me. I did nothing today. I went down for water, thought nothing about the refugees, thought nothing about cancer, forgot the name of my dead husband. God, forgive me. I forgot his name. And that's just kind of, you know, it's grief, it's desire, it's all of the things that we don't like to kind of talk about. I'm going to read you just two more poems and then I'll leave you be. Thank you again so much, Lupe, for having me and for sharing space with me, Andrea and Ray. I'm gonna read you guys after the George Floyd protest. I don't want to leave it there. I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna do BDSM before dusk say maybe, and then a girls trip home, and then we're out. That's cool. Okay. And BDSM before dusk say maybe. If anybody remembers, in September of 2020, while we were all at home, the sky turned orange in California, and everybody was like, what is that? And it was related to climate change. And so that's the only kind of context you need, is that the sky turned orange one day. A crisis, how we came easily to the suckling winds of California, How the slow climb from the madness of our dirt bed became the defining feature of our affair, a searing headline stenciled in ash. For me, you came, and to me, you will return. Our anatomies tethered together in an occasional vigil to time. Our combined temperatures writhing on the floor of our young universe. So, my love, remember this. There is no you without me. I do not enjoy this ache, the depth of it. Once your love, an eclipse of feverish sky, slid into me between my shades as a thrust of tangerine wine, dabbing my walls in eternal eve, a concentrated scatter of intense horizon, and rang violently in the untouched places, the sodomized cities of me where I wanted to be moaned into. Your abad touching me, neon, but now, my love, you are too invasive. A parasite, taking my entire orgasm as your own, stealing away my evergreen gasp, my evergreen spread of garden between my legs, the salty licks between my earth's burns at your touch now. How did you not hear me yell? Why did you keep on when I started to flail if I weren't already covered in scars? If your men didn't find these endearing, bury themselves in the horror of my inescapable taxonomy, would you have bowed your head to my bruised columns, fed your mouth to any of my mouths, blow at my surface and wonder at my survival, say, however did you make it here? Was your lust for my obedience always a lust for my terror? Could you have loved me without my agony? Without my fear, have you not been paying attention? All I wanted was to be held, a willing servant of your desire, to be your relief and your elucidation, your patient remembering of release. But animal, you have done your worst, taking what wasn't yours to take, and now I am your death. Defying lover, lover, I am a beacon of, I do whatever the fuck I want, and what I want now is to know that some things heal. To unclench the map of my evanescent, unpropagated desire from your careless ties. What I want now is for you to pull out so I can rebuild what you've broken. What I want now is to rub at myself in long, unmitigated waves until you are forgotten by my body. I am prepared above and beyond for the permanence of your exit. I am heavy with it. I cannot blink and I cannot stop the knowing of how we will end. And that is a letter from Earth to all of us humans. Last poem, a girl's trip home. And this is for my witches in Texas. We are almost there. I tell the women clutching the car's agitated wheels, staring us between the year and its morning. To viscid stretches of lavender, they pedal and melt in the chase of my palms, blooming in the backseat. Flexing an endearing pose, they ride the glide and release of every yearning attached to our first few missed exits in Texas. A first turn towards our buried or burned, another turn towards our sickled bodies, a third turn towards our terminal disease, love. But our triptych desire, novel as it was in its run down the sweaty vertebrae of the highway to Galveston, is now a tale of three once sea-filled bowls, empty, overturned, and flat. A parable about how time gorges on memory, weather has its way with the heart. Faith fails us all sometimes. Whoever we were when we left, faded with that famine summer of our lives, died of thirst, out along the side of the road, was left to the lengthening nights. No telling now who we will be once we arrive, wherever it is we are going. We are almost there. I try to tell the women still clutching each other in the back seat and crying. We are almost there. We are almost there. Hold on. Please, hold on. Thank you.
I'm breathless and speechless. And what? Time gorges on memory. That's the last. Texas Poetry Roadshow, everybody. What?
Thank you.
They didn't kill me. This is such good stuff. Okay. So Felida, thank you for that beautiful amount of work. I would hug you if
I
you're
know,
ready.
long distance hugs.
Long distance hug. With that, I'm going to read two pieces, and then everybody can put their screens up. And Felida, thank you for damn, just all of y'all just okay. Get it together. Let me get it together. Hi, I'm text poet laureate Luke Mendes, and I'm gonna do these things. So I have a double screen because this is still my pandemic office, and so if I'm looking that way, it's because I'm looking at some poems. I'm not ignoring you or anything. I'll read two pieces, and then we'll get into some questions, and then do that stuff. Yeah. So this first piece is no, not, I'll reverse order. This piece is the second in a series. When the original news came out of the 43 missing students out of Guerrero, out of Ayotzinapa, I had actually been called, I think the night that everything happened, or the morning after everything had happened, before it hit the press, and was asked to translate for a news reporter. And it was a community social worker who had been in contact and had been communicating with the Normalista school and the students as they were fundraising so they could attend different events and like have things for their school. And the purpose, these were all young men who were studying to be they were student teachers. They were education majors, studying to be teachers so they could go and teach indigenous populations and rural populations in the state of Guerrero. They were disappeared. There's current investigations already happening. There's tons of podcasts. If they're out there, like just look up Ayotzinapa and 43 students and you'll get into the news. Once the news was out and everything was up and running, the work that the three poets for this evening kind of brought up kind of had me thinking on this, connections to family and social justice action, Spanish language, the border, all of it, right? Violence as we know it in different spaces. And I had the luxury, the blessing, I guess, to have worked with the families from the missing 43 as they had worked on creating a three-pronged caravan across Mexico and into the US. And there were three different routes that they took, one coming up straight Texas, one going to California, and one going Louisiana that way. And all three were going to like move into DC to address community. And when the portion of the caravan that came into Texas arrived here in Houston, the father of one of the 43, the father of Cristian Alfonso Rodriguez Terumbre, happened to have been in that caravan with family members of two other disappeared gentlemen. And the evening that they arrived, they provided a dinner, and there was a baile folclórico, and one of the dancers was a Houston-based educator, and she performed the state baile folclórico for the state of Guerrero, and she performed the woman's part. And Cristian's father had teared up and told everyone that his son and several of the other boys that had been disappeared were learning and had learned the men's portion of that particular baile folclórico. And so after that heartfelt moment and that communication of that night, in the days that followed, I interviewed the Houston-based dancer to get her perspective on that night. And so I wrote a poem based on that moment, right? A dancer tells me about the 43 para Cristian Alfonso Rodríguez de Lumbre. Y en los suspiros decía, en los suspiros decía, el que la saca la llena. Las Amarías, Arturo Viela Hernández. It is a hot night when I take the stage. I know these steps. Una lucha para mí, a flutter in the lights, a flock of birds in my head, a rhythm I cannot step away. From my home, my guerrero suffers, a loss, an absence. 43 are missing. When I look up at the sky, could not see los pájaros cardenales. I race to put on my dance shoes. I race to hug my children. I race to count the heads in my own classroom. I race to say the names of 43 sons gone somewhere, engrave them on my dance shoe tacones. I want a sanamiento, dress up in a huipil, a yellow skirt, a field of yellow flowers in my hair. I heard el gavilán say, a mi hijo le gusta bailar baile folclórico. It echoes desde la costa de mi Acapulco, across the mountains in Ayotzinapa, up this border. I let the pañuelo flicker around the air, the bird that flows, buscando respuesta, un nido, un respiro. He came to find his son, to ask for help, to dance a cumbia with me, to watch us, came to watch me dance las Amarías, and every step was a pounding fight with shadows, the longest I have ever danced. I can't watch the rostros in the crowd, feel the tears well up on my face. I keep the beat, close my eyes every few breaths, look around, think I see el pico pico, a young normalista, bring his own paliacate and share a dance with me. It is an ofrenda, una llama, an echo, a marcha, a fogata, a fight, a linterna, a flare, a beckoning, a rezo, a pause, un movimiento, led with a simple handkerchief. I made this gavilán, el señor Clemente, cry that night. Hypnotize him with a bandana that glows, make his heart swell, remind him of a brilliant picture, a tarima and his son caught up in a dance. Watch his lips as he mentions his son, that all our sons will dance once more. The second piece made me think of home. The function of how home works for me is my mother's family is from South Texas, so the Rio Grande Valley. I grew up in Galveston, and then my family in Mexico, in the Cerros of Jalisco. And we're a rancho family. They farm. We have farm land. And I hadn't gone back for like 7 years. And we took our 4-year-old this summer, and she got to hang out with cousins and like see everything. And like, I don't know if you can y'all see, I don't know if y'all can see that. Like that's my home in the mountains, right? Like, so that's the shack that my great grandfather had built. It's real rural. So, I grew up there with kerosene lanterns and a community well and things, right? So I didn't grow up understanding poverty because I was 8 blocks from the beach and a short walk to a hilltop, and it was beautiful, right? But this piece is about like age and what it does and what farming is. And I grew up not being entirely a farmer, but also knowing the ins and outs of farming life, and milking cows and getting eggs at 5 a.m. is not romantic. So the folks that are like, I raise chickens in the city, like I'm like, okay, that's lovely, but that's woof. So That said, I did write this piece about like what age does to the farming body, right? And I thought of an old song, like written in the 30s, right? El Barzón, written by Luis Perez Mesa. If you've never heard it, go look it up. And so this is this piece. It's a moment where me and my dad go out to our lands to go clean it up after they've kind of replanted. And I hurt my back because I'm not a spring chicken no more. So oh, viejo. El cuerpo avisa. The body alerts, the body something. El cuerpo avisa, the epigraph. Todo mi maíz se llevó, ni pa comer me dejó. El Barzón, Luis Pérez Mesa. Esas tierras del rincón, I look at them como un buey pando, feeling the dry earth crunch under my boots. Es julio. Y si sigue así, dirán que es sequía. I pray it is not for now. I will do what we have always done. I will work like my father, él y sus mandados, en las labores. We will fix a fence, the barbed wire, cut and retwist and cut and retwist until a new post is put in place. Levantaremos rostros al ver las nubes, all gray, completamente llenos de agua, but it isn't meant for our hectares. Quizás mañana, mijo. He looks at me. He says, vente, algo rapidito. We go into the fields, rows of little milpitas all around us. I know what we must do. We must bend over, pull up the weeds. All the milpitas that are growing wild, arrancalas, viejo, my father says. I have ganas and a belly. But my body remembers. Esta tierra, this land, these hileras, 48 hileras atravesar, mano over mano, pull everything that does not follow the rows. It takes us over an hour. We laugh. I remember the feel, dry earth in my clutches, the clump of green entre mis dedos, dusting the roots on the thighs of my pants, returning soil to soil. This would have been done in 30 minutes if I was a kid. I would have earned 5 pesos and a Pepsi. Hey, I say, me duele la espalda, ¿sabes? My father laughs and says something about his rodillas. But we do. We pick the 2 hectares clean. We talk about how much my aunt will make from this cosecha de elote, suficiente para pagarle a alguien más joven que pueda arrancar las jodidas hierbas. Vámonos, mijo, que esta yunta ya ni anda. And so if everybody wants to come back on screen, we can do a couple of questions and have a nice conversation. Thank you so much for doing this. You can put your mics on too. So
I was thinking, I forgot for a second that you said only 2. I was like, what?
Thank you, Andrea, for the note. We're over here writing like notes to each other in the,
I know.
in the chat. I can't see that part. What? Oh man, like when you feel like everything's quiet in your writing world, how do you get back into it? Like, is there something that shakes you that's like, I saw this thing and I'm going right back into it? Or is it a gradual thing? Like, do you do something else? Like, what do you do in the time that you're not writing? And is it like purposeful, or is it you just got out of it because things got crazy? Is it life? Like, what are you doing that jogs you back into it, or what are you doing when you're not writing? I would say for me, it's raising a 4-year-old.
Mhm.
I will say that when I was teaching everything else, it'd be all the grading. But now that I'm only teaching creative writing, it's different. Like I'm entirely in this whole other landscape of like seeing other writers and getting into a groove of like reviewing their work. And they're high school students, but they're like, we're gonna be all right. The future's bright, y'all. I'm just, if at least the 104 creative writing students from my high school are out in the world, like we're gonna be all right. But yeah, like that keeps me on my toes. Like I do read some, I watch stupid amounts of like shows and stuff, but that keeps me in the work, I guess. So I don't totally freak out. There are moments where I'm like, oh my God, I haven't written anything. What am I do? But yeah, so how do you fall out of it? How do you get back into it? What does that look like for you?
I don't know. That's an interesting question because I started off doing more performance poetry. So I wasn't always writing for the page, which is completely different as what I'm learning as an adult, right? And so I think I intentionally fell out of the performance space because I got to a point where I didn't want for my work to be for critique like that always. I wanted to be able to give something to the world, to the space and just say, hey, this is what it is. This is what I've written. This is what I feel. And that's enough. It doesn't need anything beyond that. And so I kind of just naturally gravitated away from it. I think now that I'm focusing more on writing to the page, I find myself in the regular life. Honestly, I'm trying to do my best is what I say. Like I'm using what I got. I'm doing the best with what I got. But when it comes to the writing, I have to make intentional time and also challenge myself to be in spaces with people who will challenge my work. So it's this like, I gave it away in one space. Now I'm picking it up. But I think like more importantly with that structure, I work with people like you, Lupe. There's a couple of Black women out of U of H who have brought me into their circle who, I acknowledge that I don't come from like trained writing, creative writing. And so they're allowing me to bring my voice and also them giving me like, this is a different structure. You need to try this. You need to explore this. And I think that it's pulling some things out of me that just doing performance wouldn't have. So I feel like, just left one, got to another place, but I guess I'm a little further into like being able to receive those things in that way. And so it's charging and inspiring a whole different kind of work. Like I have so much gratitude behind it.
That's awesome. Yay.
There's a whole generation of us who started in slam.
Yeah.
And then ran to the page and became obsessed. Just as obsessed as we were with the slams.
There was a conversation that a few of us were having about like spoken word and slam and open mic and like I at some point somebody's gonna have to write some book on the poetics of like
I feel like Joshua Bennett tries to. Like I haven't read the newest book. It's a history of spoken word and poetry slam in America. Joshua Bennett just had that book come out, which is not to be confused with Slam, which is another book that came out a couple of decades. It's not the same. I don't know how in depth Joshua does it, but I agree because there is a clear like poetic that happens in slam and in spoken word on the stage and what's happening there and how it's translated into modern contemporary poetry that we're reading now, right? Like I can go through the list and I'd be like, oh, y'all like Ocean Vuong? Interesting. Let me tell you about that slam. Oh, you like Danez? Interesting. Oh, you like so-and-so? Like I can go on. Oh, you like Amanda Gorman? Let me like,
correct.
I could just keep going and talking about how spoken word and poetry slam community specifically have kind of changed how we're reading poems.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's this need for accessibility and not in the same way as it used to be, but that's a whole nother conversation. Your question.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say your question about what I do in a time. I don't stop. I had a dream a long time ago when I was a teenager in slam, and I had to work a whole bunch of jobs, and I was homeless and all the other stuff that happened. And the dream was I want to have, and I'm calling it a privilege. And I'm not saying I want to be a white man. I'm saying I wanted the privilege and the freedom of a white man to be able to just lose time and to unravel and to do weird things and have the freedom and the space to do that without it having to cost my life. It's like I really put down in one of my applications. I was like, I would like to sit in a bathtub naked and write, because I heard a poet did it, and I heard another poet got really drunk and they just sat and took walks and they wrote books, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I get to do now. So there's actually not a writing time. I literally kind of
just do.
I just kind of do, and it's like, what do you do when you're not writing? I was like, look at TikTok. Yeah. I've been trying to watch one movie for the last 3 days and I still haven't gotten to it, because I will be on TikTok and then somebody will say something and I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting concept. Let me go learn more about that on YouTube. Oh, I learned a whole lot, and I'll write notes. And the next thing I know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, you got something to do at 10 o'clock in the morning. You got a meeting to go to. So I'm organizing on a different level now. I'm working to help get more funding to artists. That's what I'm really interested in. And so I'm working on that kind of in the back, kind of behind the scenes space right now, trying to find ways to do that. And I am really living the dream. I made a post on Twitter earlier today. I get to live in a space right now where I really can just be like, I don't have a schedule. I don't have a boss. I don't clock in. Right now I am literally just kind of, hence I was going to do tarot and I forgot what day it is and what time it is, because I was getting ready to do tarot. I was like, oh yeah, we should do some tarot, because I'm making new tarot cards, because I decided that has to be a part of my new project now. So I drink, I dance by myself around 2 o'clock in the morning. I light all my candles and dance, and
that's real. That's dope. That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'm working and not working.
That's dope. That's dope.
I'm very amused of hearing the journey that you guys had from spoken word through like more traditional books, because in the tradition I came from, the Hispanic tradition, is being kind of the opposite, in the sense that like I was raised into this idea that being a writer means to be alone, sitting in a room, and yeah, it's like kind of like showing everyone the product of what you have done, and not letting anyone into that process. Mm-hmm. And all the journey that I have had to become the not necessarily just the poet, but the person that I am today, has to do with reversing the lesson of the poetry, like the writing itself. It doesn't have to be a product, doesn't need to be a product. It is a process. And I keep repeating my students, like literature is so much more than just producing more books. It's intervening the way in which we have this experience of living a life in a certain way. And so it takes me back to what you guys hopefully said, because that's what you have done. I can tell, yes, you have wrote all those books and wonderful things that Lupe read at the beginning, but you also have used the opportunity of art to create the kind of life you want to live. Mm. So for me, it has a lot to do with the issue of motherhood, because it is already hard to find a time that, as you said, you gotta lose writing, because writing is not necessarily, you never write a poetry that you want to write. You write just the poetry that you can write. So you have an idea, but writing thinks itself. So you start writing because you're going to come across something that you don't know. That's why we all write. Otherwise, we just, tell stories or something, but go into the process, painful process of writing. So when I had my first kid and then my second kid, I found myself allowing less time to myself to just experiment because, you know, I have urgent needs. And I know, and I was reading Adrienne Rich the other day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's describing my feelings, you know, like, so like 100 years ago, because she was like saying something very similar to what Felita was saying of like, I want it all, you know, I want it all. What's the problem with that? But one of the things I have found that can solve the problem, because I was seeing like a lot of Latin American writers that I was comparing my journey with, they stopped by like, you know, to be so productive by the time they had the family, and then when they try to came back, it was difficult to be reinserted into the field in the same way. So that happens in several professions. But the difference now, and that's when I came back to the argument about, you know, the process, the spoken word, and being designer life, is that I have a community, and that's everything for me. And I know you guys understand that, like you have been talking about that in a different ways, especially from what you have read tonight. And I also found that there are other ways to write that doesn't involve sitting down. You know, like I have my friend that I send these audios because I realized that that's the way. I also, it's not just because of the time, it's also that I found it that it's great to write when you're moving. Like, I don't understand why never anyone told me before that sitting down, it's like the most painful way to write, you know, and
bad on your back.
Right.
It's really bad.
Like
but it has a lot. It needs to be tied to a notion of what really you aiming for.
Yeah,
it's like deconstructing what the old image of like it's a typewriter in a quiet room, like
yeah.
Like I got my start doing open mics and at bars and bookstores and different spots, and I had my two roommates in college were house DJs.
Wow. And
so I would write in a quiet and nothing will be, there will be no noise. And to hell with that. The two of them would like spin. We had 4 subwoofers, 4 speakers, 4 decks, 6 racks of records. And every night we would come home from school or whatever. And they're like, we're going to do. And they would start playing from like 8 o'clock to midnight. And if I was going to write, it would be midnight on. And then I started realizing, why am I holding myself back? If they get to do their craft and practice, then I started challenging myself. I would sit in the hallway between the one back bedroom where one DJ had all his stuff, and then our living room, dining room area where the other DJ had his stuff. And I would sit in the middle of the 2 spaces where the sound would accumulate.
Mm-hmm.
And I would put on a timer. And I've made an agreement with them that for however long they spun is however long I wrote. And so I, to this day at 46, this was like my 20, 21, 22, I was writing the house music. And I learned to write to music, period. And so it wasn't until I took the MFA at 30 whatever with Sasha, like I explained to Sasha like my understanding. Like I didn't know crap about poetics or the aesthetics of our writing, like all the theory stuff, right? All the big things. And then Sasha was like, your poetics are around the sonic understanding of lyric and tempo and assonance in a poem. And I was like, you mean that's a oh my God. And I was like floored. And she was like, there's a whole understanding of what that is.
Yeah.
And then we would talk about like the open mic and like performance poetry and slam and salon readings in people's houses. Like one of the most Latin American concepts was underground readings occurred in people's homes.
I literally picked this apartment because I looked at the living room and I was like, oh, that's big enough.
Right. And it's like, but like conceptually, when we look at like populations and people of color across all these, when we say the global South, right? Like you think of a salon reading, every single damn reading that I've ever gone to that's a Spanish language reading in Houston, they weren't able to like figure out spaces that were in public So there were salon readings in people's living rooms and dining rooms and moving tables out of the way and the whole nine. And it was the most fulfilling concept.
Yeah.
And there were kids running around and dogs and, you know, wine bottles. And I'm like,
That's what I was gonna say.
that's the deal. And to me, that feels more authentic, right? And I learned from que en paz descanse, Raul Salinas, who said, if you're gonna do, he's the founder of Red Salmon Arts in Austin, right? I once heard Raul speak and say that if you are doing a community reading or a community work, and what you're doing doesn't involve little kids, if you have an event and you don't have little kids or elders in that thing, it's not community.
Yeah.
It's just people just like you. And that I took that to heart as I got older and was appreciative of like how I'm engaging, right? And like, and it's okay to sometimes take that break and like you got to just sit back and figure out what you need to figure out, right? And readjust and, you know, redefine what that looks for you. I think that's like a healthy thing.
One thing I've been looking for since I got to Chicago that I miss so bad about Texas right now. I miss it so bad. I am in the house all the time, right? Because technically I don't have to be anywhere, right?
Right.
But I also don't know the space well enough. And I'm just broke enough that I can't be out everywhere. Like I need one cheap bar that has a little indoor space that's dark and like dingy, that I don't have to look people directly in the eye and it's a little sketchy, but it also has a back patio that I can go out and have a cigarette on and look at the stars and stuff. Like I just need my bar. I need my bar where people kind of know me, but they don't really know me. So now nobody's gonna be up in my face and I could just go and do my thing and I can get blasted drunk and nobody's gonna mess with me. And like, that's what I missed that about Texas. I could get tacos, I could get my drinks, I
get all these little things.
I get all these little things and I could just be out and I would meet random people and I could sit in the back and write. And whatever was happening at night was happening at local bands, all that kind of stuff. It was always just random, whatever tonight is what it is. But there was always like a little place I could go and hide in the corner. And I had a bunch of little bars like that in Texas right now. I'm like, okay, y'all got it. Everywhere I go, people dress up. I wear jeans everywhere. People do not wear jeans like that here. People like I wear like clothes that are comfy for going outside for me, and people get dressed up here and they do makeup, and then it's a big literary community, so everybody's very literary, and I'm like, that's cool and all, but like y'all just where the real people at?
Hi.
So that it's interesting. I think that we have a lot of unlearning to do. I'm a big fan of the MFA because there are things I wanted to learn, like the technical language of it that's being used right now. All that being said, though, MFAs are brand new. They were created in like the 60s, 70s.
Right.
There were writers before then, and there will be writers after MFAs. MFAs are turning out a lot of the same kind of work. And so it's really important that we remember who we are outside of the MFA, as well as, in the MFA. And I think that we're finally getting to a point as a culture where we're going, you know what, I could get an MFA or I can't. And I'm still going to read and I'm still going to write and I'm still going to create something that's pretty fantastic. One day we'll start moving. Say what?
Hearing you say that is just like moving, because I'm in this space now where it's like the next thing to make you legitimate is the MFA. Go ahead and just call it. Even though I have higher degrees and other things, it's like for you to be a legitimate writer, to be able to do those things, you need this MFA. And it's hard, like it's a constant battle, because it's like, or could you just find writing communities? Could you just go sit with people from an MFA? Could you listen in from other people who've experienced work or published in these ways? And it pulls on you, man. It pulls.
So many free classes or affordable classes and workshops from extremely talented writers. And I really feel like you could theoretically just go at your own pace and what you can afford and what's available to you. You don't have to get an MFA to apply for awards. You don't have to get an MFA to apply for residencies. They're not looking for that. You could apply for just about anything you want for funding. An agent isn't going to ask you if you have an MFA to submit to the agent. The agent wants to know, is your work good? Right. Mm-hmm. So like there's still this need for you to work on your craft at however you need to work on your craft. But that little piece of paper is for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it's for.
I give Andrea works at the University of Texas at El Paso. Miners. That's where I got my MFA. Beautiful program. The online program is legit, hands down, one of the best experiences I ever had. But I was grown, like I was in my 30s and had already had many conversations with other writers when I started looking for what I wanted to do. And UTEP had hit every heavy mark. The like faculty was of color. I had talked to people who were in the program who had taken a break and because family things, and the program was beautifully like family oriented, community oriented. All the writers I got to work with, we didn't sound the same because it was online. We were all over the country and out of the country. And so we weren't like there in space doing residency, but I took the time to do the MFA to invest in myself. Like it was, I paid an affordable price to go to school and read the books to see what was up. And like that was entirely for me. Like I was learning same thing you said, Felita, like I was learning what the terms and what these things were, and then taking note of like what everybody was reading in and out of class. But like I put it in my application. My thesis chair, Sasha Pimentel, says she remembers reading my application and said I was real ballsy because I put in my letter, I already have a writing career and I'm not really doing this for the piece of paper. I want to do this because I want to invest in my own writing.
Yeah.
And it doing like some people do need the scheduling, like you will come to class at this time and you will do these things and you will do that. And like some people need it, and that's cool. Yeah. But you can like figure out all of those structural pieces by, you know, investing in programming that exists in different spots, right? Like there are ways to do it that can be affordable and doable. But if you can do an MFA, to not to correct you, but be out of love and care, you're already a legit writer, punto final. And if you were to do anything, it's like the icing on the cake. Like like when I started the program, it's also this other weird, like, there were people that I was in the program with that had never read a poem out loud. And I was like, oh, that's real. Because some people, that's where they're at in their career, right? And so I was like, oh, I have experience doing these other things, right? Like there's that level of understanding. And so doing this work, like it just makes you even sharper, right? And so invest in the way that you can invest, because you're just with the three of us, like the four of us in conversation, like the breadth of experience within the poetry community, like there's four very vastly different understandings of the way this works, right? And it's beautiful, y'all. Like
I really wanted to meet Patricia Smith and Carolyn Forche because I had stolen both of their books when I was in undergrad, and I stole them from the school library. And I wanted to learn from them directly. I wanted to be in the room with them because they were shining stars to me. And I took out a lot of loans, and those loans are still sitting on my back and on my neck and trying to drown me. Right. The loans, that's the only way I could have gone, because there was no family money, there was no job money, there was no money. And so do I think I could have did it without the MFA? Yes. But it really was just I don't really want to learn from these people. That was also before the internet was doing what the internet's doing now.
Correct.
Because you can go and learn from Alexander Chi for under $500, like, you know, in certain workshops. And so like there are things are different now.
But so, yeah. So we are at 8:51. And we had such a great time.
Got lives, my bad. You know what's funny? I live 15 minutes away from the kid now. Yeah. I live next door to her grandparents. I'm a birth parent, if you guys don't know, and I gave birth to a little girl who I then placed for adoption. And her parents are my friends, and they're also poets, and they live here in Chicago. It's one of the main reasons why I moved here. And so I live next door to the grandparents, and I live 15 minutes away from the kid. And the kid spent the night a few weeks ago. And I was like, I made a good decision. I love spending time with you, but I'm better as an auntie. I am TT. So I watch parents, and you guys are amazing. Congratulations. Y'all do some work. Y'all do some work. My brain was like, I don't know how to entertain a 10-year-old. I don't know. How do you do that?
Beautiful. So beautiful. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. And it will continue on
Yes.
the reading.
There's one last reading that'll be in April. And it will be Joaquin Cihuatanejo out of Dallas.
I haven't seen him.
Oh my God, why is my Outspoken Bean from here in Houston. He will have completed his 2-year stint as Texas Poet Laureate. No, Houston Poet Laureate.
You are the poet laureate.
I'm the current one. And then Gris Munoz from El Paso. And so that'll be the final set of poets for that night. So anybody who's watching this, we hope you enjoyed tonight's reading and this great conversation. It is an honor and a blessing to share space with 3 of you. Thank you so much for your words tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Un placer.
Much love. See you soon, all of you.
Y que pasen buenas noches.
Absolutely. Now go give my girl some fruit snacks.
No,
Girl, when somebody was reading, I had to go heat up some pancakes real fast.
What about those pancakes? Yes.
And then I got to get her to bed at some point. Anybody watching this, sacrifices the things, naps. I got bags. Anyways.
And you still
I love y'all. Thank y'all so much. Bye.